map randomiser, most famously seen in the majors, instituted by Valve, where either for a group stage game, teams ban down and then there are three maps left and one is randomly selected, or for series play in the playoffs, in the bracket, you have the teams ban a map, pick a map, and then there's three maps remaining, and the third map of the series is randomly selected. This is a feature which I think never really had a place in Counter-Strike, if you think through the reasons as to why it was brought into play and what it actually has accomplished, and I think should be removed because I think it takes away from top-level Counter-Strike and spoils some aspects of the tournament and of high-level play that the majority of us enjoy and are part of what has made Counter-Strike great throughout the ages. So this was first introduced at ESL1 Cologne 2014, which was the third CSGO major. It was in August of 2014, and we're now up to 9 majors, and so this has been in place at 7 of the majors. First and foremost, a key reason to remove the map randomizer is that it's unnecessary. It doesn't serve the purpose of what it originally was instituted for. So what happened was the first ever major in Counter-Strike, DreamHack Winter 2013, in November of 2013, was at a time when Counter-Strike only had 5 maps in the pool. Now, at that point in time, as a result, the map that, if you've noticed throughout the history of Counter-Strike, most teams have been okay playing, even if they didn't necessarily like it, is Inferno. And the same was the case at the time then. And so what happened was many teams would just ban other maps, and you would constantly end up at this tournament with Inferno as a group stage game and as maps in the series play. And there's obvious reasons for that. First and foremost, there was only 5 maps in the pool. So remember, 2 of the maps in the pool were Train and Nuke. Now, teams who didn't like Nuke would have a nightmare time because the teams who did like it obviously won all the CT sides in theory. Teams who didn't like Train, well, you never went against teams like NIP on Train, for example. Teams like Very Games permaban Train. And so it just so happened that at this one tournament, the first major, it was Inferno the majority of the time. Now, first and foremost, if you just look at it on that level, sure, Valve has a point. If it's Inferno all the time, let's pick something that'll mix things up, make it different maps. Which, by the way, I don't necessarily agree with myself, because if the teams want to play that map, why can't they? But here's the issue, okay, is that this is a problem Valve created themselves by creating the major. Because what a lot of people don't know is in 2014, only a month or two before the major was announced, the major system and how it would be played on what maps, actually, Counter-Strike was not played on the retail versions of the maps. For maps like Train, Nuke, Inferno, Mirage, we had these special editions, so _SE, _CE for Mirage, and these versions were much preferred than the other ones. They had different textures, little tweaks to them that made them better for competitive play. And so maps like, for example, the special edition of Train, a team like NiP loved, whereas NiP thought like, okay, the normal version of Train's good, but we don't like it as much. Famously, Mirage, many teams loved the CE version of Mirage. But when Valve came along, think of Valve's logic. At the time, CSGO is a small game. They're making a world championship. As you've noticed is the trend with Valve, they want it to be just like other game developers, where the noob player who's just playing matchmaking is playing the versions of the map that you're playing in the competition. They want the competition in esports to operate as an advertisement for the casual game. And so in this sense, they didn't want pros playing on these special versions of the maps. Now, there's an obvious solution there, by the way. They could have just introduced those special versions of the maps as the retail ones and introduced them there because they were better. But instead what they did is they just threw all those retail maps out and went to threw all the special editions out and went to the retail maps not that long before the big tournament. And now this was crucial, actually, because a vote was done with all the top teams in private, and they asked them for each of the maps, which would you vote for, the retail version, the special edition. And with the exception of something like 2 teams, every team voted for the special edition, yet we got them taken out. And so as a result, we ended up with this 5-map pool where some of the maps aren't even the ones that people want to play compared to the other versions. So as a result, you end up on something like an Inferno where everyone can at least agree to play it. So Valve in part created that scenario themselves, because for maps like Train and Mirage, the other versions, the retails, were quite different from the special editions. Now then, another reason why they instituted the randomizer, if we're being honest, and a primary reason, is not just the Inferno scenario at DreamHack Winter, it's that Valve themselves had then forced 2 maps upon us. They decided one day that we were going to have these 2 maps, Cobblestone and Overpass, and what's more, not only would they force them upon us and put them in the next major, but you wouldn't be able to play them at offline competitions until that major. And so at the major itself, 2 brand new maps were introduced that no one had played in offline competition in any official tournament. And so by having a randomizer, unless both teams banned those maps, which is quite unlikely to happen, you're going to end up with a scenario where every now and then someone's going to have to play them. And this happened. NIP had to play Cobblestone in the group stage against Epsilon. She got whooped on it completely. Then in the playoffs, NIP locked out getting Cobblestone against teams who didn't know how to play it and won it. In fact, Cobblestone really did throw a massive spanner in the works. Why do I always say wrench there? Massive wrench in the works for that tournament. Like, it could have gone very differently if it had been maps that everyone knew had played and were all good maps. You can always look back on that one and really wonder why. And so that did remove some of the legitimacy of NIP's win there, believe it or not, if you consider the other maps possible. So that's one of the other reasons they did it, is they wanted to force people to play those brand new maps. Now, first and foremost, the main reason why people didn't want to play those maps, there's 2 key reasons. One, both of those maps were bad. Both of those maps have since been reworked, and particularly Cobblestone had a massive rework. On the B site, that platform area where you come out, there used to be a broken wall entirely on the middle part in between that. So it wasn't just like the little broken part down here. Along here, there was just an entire section missing. So it made it a nightmare as terrorists to try and get out there. Think about what a T-sided map it is now. It was a nightmare as terrorists to try and attack. There was the middle part also going over to the A site wasn't the same, so you didn't have a fast rotation on any sense of the... I mean, you don't really have a fast rotation now, but you had nothing then. It was very slow. It was a terrible map. And so... first and foremost, people didn't want to play the maps because they were bad. But then second of all, because they were brand new, people also weren't comfortable on it. They hadn't practiced it much. So this made it a terrible scenario. Now, what's funny is, look at the history of those 2 maps, Cobblestone and Overpass. Since they've been fixed and reworked, people play both of the maps, and Cobble is one of the most popular maps in the entire competitive game now. But that wasn't done beforehand. You didn't need to do that. In terms of the randomizer, to force us to pick it, you could have just done what was done here, introduced it slowly in other competitions, reworked it, then once the reworked ones are out and people have practiced them, now people will pick them. You don't have to force them to pick them or trick them into picking them through a randomizer. Aside from it being unnecessary, it also just outright ruins series. So one of the worst problems that can happen with this randomizer, it's always tilted me, is that you can get a scenario where the map that comes up as the 3rd map is a map that neither team likes. In fact, there might have been a map in the last 3 maps available for a series, for example, where both teams do like that map. And if you'd have banned all the way down, as you used to before, the 3rd map was whatever was left, you would have gotten to a map that both liked to some degree or are willing to play, and therefore you'd get the stage set for a very good series. Instead, with the randomizer, you can get a scenario where this is the 2nd worst map of both teams, and they've already banned their worst map, or some scenario of such, and then they both have to play a map that neither like, neither are comfortable, neither really know, neither have as their number 1 practice priority. As a result, you're in general not going to see high-level Counter-Strike when you do that. So there's some famous examples of this in history where the map came out that people didn't want. So, okay, a famous example, what's funny is, because that's why I referenced before that Epsilon played Cobble against NIP and beat them on it, because when NIP got Cobblestone as the 3rd map of the same tournament, ESL 1 Cologne 2014, against Cloud9 in the first round, NIP did not want that map. That's the funny thing. NIP turned out to be really good on it, and they had this miracle run on it, and they won it against LDLC next, and they did kind of develop a style of how to play it, but they did that because they were forced to and on the fly. What happened there was neither team wanted that map to come out. There's many other maps they'd have much rather played, and if you look at the way that game went, NIP barely knew how to play it. They didn't really. They figured out a style as mainly based around Get Right being brilliant on the map as it was being played, and Cloud9, you could tell, had no comfort on the T side whatsoever. So it was a really terrible affair. Then, same tournament, over on the other side of the quarterfinals, Fnatic played Na'Vi, and the 3rd map came out Nuke. Now, at the time, both teams permabanned Nuke, but they decided to gamble. Well, only a 1 in 3 chance, right? The Nuke comes up, so both of them didn't ban out Nuke here. They banned out other stuff, played 1 a map each, and it went to Nuke, and it was a 16-14 game, and it was a pile of shit. Wasn't a good game in any sense. By the way, both these games, 16-14 games. Here's another one that's very interesting, okay. DreamHack Winter 2014, the next major after Cologne. The final was NIP versus LDLC, and the 3rd map came out as Overpass. Now, Overpass is a map that earlier in the tournament LDLC had beaten Nip on, but LDLC themselves didn't like it. They'd lost a bunch of times in recent history to a bunch of different teams, some of them below their level. They didn't want to play no overpass. They'd lost it already in theory to Fnatic, even though they'd won the first half on it, etc. That was not a map either team felt comfortable on. Both teams knew they were going to have to run up big CT halves because they weren't very good on T-side on it. Now, again, that ended up being an overtime session. Notice how these 3 games so far have all been like maximum 30 rounds or overtime. That's because you've lowered the level of Counter-Strike. You've got 2 teams who don't want to play the map, aren't comfortable on it, probably don't practice it a whole lot and don't have strengths on it. Therefore, the level just gets like reset to almost nothing. People are just doing crappy stuff here and there, and it's really backwards and forwards because no one can close a round out and no one can really make a run and any time, and no one can control the economy and dominate the... All the things that make up high-level Counter-Strike are non-existent, and it's just this horrible, bloody back-and-forth dogfight in a way that's no technique, no skill. It's just not good at all to watch. And as a result, even though these are like, oh, look, it's 30 rounds or it's 40 rounds played, it's not classic Counter-Strike at all. Might be exciting on a low level of like, oh my god, who's even going to win this? You can't know. But it's not high-level Counter-Strike that then exciting, like when we saw G2, for example, play on Overpass against NIP in the final of Starladder. That was 2 teams who could play the map and were playing a really high-level game and playing fantastic Counter-Strike to win the game. Wasn't this like dog shit removal of all the skill and just playing at a low level against each other. A last example as well, this is a tournament that actually wasn't a major, but it employed this randomizer, was the MLG X Games Aspen Invitational Final. So LDLC played Nip again, and the third map here was Cobblestone. This is before Cobblestone had been reworked. And this map ended up being quite a boring map. It was the old version. LDLC themselves weren't particularly good on that Cobblestone. Nip, definitely. They might say they were confident, but they weren't in any way. Like, this was not a map they wanted to play. Even at this point in time, they had Makaleli now. It wasn't for Flaren anymore. This was not a good map. And actually, this wasn't a particularly good map to watch, actually. It was just CT domination, basically, by each of the teams. So, not only is it unnecessary, not only does it ruin series, but it also requires less skill and strategy on the part of the teams. Because by allowing a randomized effect on one of the maps, you don't punish teams that have the weaker map pool with consistency. Obviously, in theory, they can get punished if the wrong map comes up, but you don't punish them with consistency as a veto process would. So there's some famous examples in the group stage where teams have been able to get upsets or have a chance at an upset against a much stronger team, because when you got down to the last 3 maps, the weaker team was good on one of the 3 maps, and that one came up. So they just locked out with a 33% chance, got the map that they could at least play, and had a chance to win, and did win in certain scenarios. Now, this just wouldn't happen. I mean, a famous example would be Team Liquid on Dust 2 against Fnatic at MLG Columbus this year. Any other map there, and Team Liquid's in a lot of trouble. They barely played any maps. And even then, guess what? Yet again, they only won in overtime, right? So you can see, this isn't high-level Counter-Strike. Now, in a scenario where a team's only good at one of the 3 remaining maps, with bans, they will now never be able to play that one map. That will get removed as the ban of the other team if the other team understands what's going on here. There'll be 2 maps left, and then the team themselves will have to ban one, and then whatever's left out, the 2 that they don't really play, they'll have to pick one of those and play that. In this scenario, you reward the better teams. You reward teams who are good on a map, the other team isn't as good, but at least one team's good on it, and then they're able to win out and show you why they're good on it and what they're good at, and progress on through the tournament. So here's the thing about this system. It would be one thing if it was non-majors using the randomizer. Like if it was the odd tournament and it's just supposed to be an unusual tournament. So like either it's like a champions type thing from Gfinity last year, or it's like the ESL Barcelona Expo where they do the picking based on like each team gets to pick who plays the next match. If it was some weird format, okay, that's one thing. You can have a cool little one-off unique approach like that. That's fine. This is the World Championship of Counter-Strike. This is supposed to be the pinnacle of Counter-Strike competition, and we're ending up with what would have been classic series, classic games that are being spoiled unnecessarily by teams getting put onto maps that this team is just locked out by getting the good draw on that one. This other team over here is better on more maps, but they got unlucky in getting this map here, or both teams don't even like the map, and so the game just degenerates to a lower level. We're supposed to be seeing the best Counter-Strike here. So put forwards a rule set, a format, a structure, which allows the best Counter-Strike. Don't add in any random elements, and specifically not in terms of the maps, which really are the lifeblood of great series. You give me the right maps, and I'll give you a classic series. Throw in a crap map, and you can just spoil the entire series. Perfect example, by the way, not of a randomizer, but where a bad map choice spoils a whole series. Think about the last major. In the semi-final of ESL 1 Cologne 2016, we had SK Gaming, the Brazilians, playing as Virtus Pro, the Poles. And Virtus Pro chose Nuke as a trick pick in their second pick. Now we know, first map was Cobblestone, incredible game. VP somehow win it out in incredible fashion. Then you go to Nuke, they get smashed completely, rubbish game, completely ruins the series. Third map, incredible series, Mirage all the way there, SK just wins. We all know if the second pick there is any of the other things that Virtus.pro might have picked, Train, etc., this would be a hell of a series. They ruined it themselves. So what I'm showing here is when the wrong map gets put in, it can spoil a whole series. Now when it gets put in randomly, arbitrarily by a computer, and the teams wouldn't even choose anything to do with that, even worse. So I hope that this gets taken out. I hope this map randomizer, the map random draw system, just gets removed because it has no place in Counter-Strike. And to this day, I've never heard a good excuse, especially for why it should be used in the playoffs. It's one thing in the group. Maybe you could make an argument for that. I've heard people try to put something forwards. But for series, we really need those third maps to actually be pick ban down to the last map. It can't just be a randomizer picking them.